Welcome to Velocity, the Vista Chamber podcast. I'm your host, Chamber CEO Rachel Beld, and it's my privilege to interview the movers, shakers, and change makers impacting our amazing Vista community and beyond. Today, I am super excited to welcome State Senator Blakespear. Elected in 2022, she represents California's 38th district, covering northern San Diego and southern Orange County, and Vista. A former mayor of Encinitas, she's now a leader on housing, homelessness, transportation, environmental protection, and public safety. She chairs key Senate committees, including environmental quality and loss and rail resiliency. Senator Blakespear has authored numerous impactful laws on climate, gun safety, and more. A lawyer, former journalist, and dedicated community leader, she lives in Encinitas with her husband, 2 teenagers, her mom, 2 cats, and 5 chickens. That's a house full. Welcome, Senator Blakespear.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much for taking time. I know that you're in district right now and you're connecting with so many people and doing some great work. So thank you for carving out time for our podcast today. Really appreciate you. So first I want to ask you, there may be some people who don't know you well yet. And so could you tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to public service?
Well, thank you. So I grew up in Encinitas. My family's actually been there for 100 years. We've been contributing to the community. I'm 4th generation. Our kids are 5th generation. And so I went to high school in Encinitas, or I went to Torrey Pines High School, which is not in Encinitas, but nearby, and then went to Northwestern for college and studied journalism. And I worked in journalism for 5 years as a reporter for the Los Angeles Times and the Associated Press. And then I went to law school and worked as a lawyer and moved home when I had 2 tiny little babies and a husband, and we wanted to move back to the place that I had grown up and had really deep roots here. So I got involved in the Traffic and Public Safety Commission.
Oh, wow. Those commissions will get you.
I know, exactly. And
Yeah.
so I did that for 4 years when the kids were really little. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to run for city council when we had a first grader and a kindergartner. And then I served 8 years on city council. So it was 6 as mayor, directly elected mayor, 2 on the city council. And then I ran for the state Senate 3 years ago. So it's been a tremendous privilege to get to represent people and work on problems, local problems in a city and also throughout the county. And now for the state, we're the 4th largest economy in the world. And it's tremendously interesting to be working in Sacramento and working on making California an even better place to live and work and have a business and raise a family.
That's great. What were the big surprises for you going from local government into state leadership?
Well, actually, it is remarkably dissimilar, the 2 jobs. Being an elected mayor versus being an elected state senator, they are entirely different. And one of the differences is that, well, first of all, being a state senator is a full-time job. Mm-hmm. So I go there Monday to Sacramento. I come home Thursday for most weeks of the year, which is a lot of time away from home. It is a personal sacrifice to do that. And we all do that because it's so important. The work is so important. But in local government, when serving as mayor on city council, you are having public meetings and interacting with the local community so much more because people come to city council meetings and city council meetings are happening every other week. And then you receive a lot of feedback either in the supermarket or over email or phone calls. And we don't have any staff that work directly for us. Mm-hmm. So all of it is being handled personally. And that means that there's a great variety of different things and ways that people approach that job. But when you get to be a legislator in the California Senate or Assembly, then you have staff members. And so the whole operation is much more professionalized. Mm-hmm. We have a system for tracking every comment that comes in. We have people who work in the district and can respond and help people with problems, like if they're having a problem with the DMV or their nursing license or something the state does. So it's really quite a different job in many ways.
That's fascinating. I think most average folks don't really know that nuance between what it's like to be an elected official at different levels. And so I think it's really helpful for people to understand. And also that it is, it is more than a full-time job. It's really very encompassing. And so thank you for that Thank you for that answer. This podcast is the Chamber podcast. And so, of course, I have to ask about businesses. And so I'm curious, how is the state supporting small business development, especially here in North County?
Yeah, well, small businesses really are the backbone of our communities. And we see that in city after city after city. There are more than 500 cities and counties in the state of California. And we recognize that the employers employ the workers who have money to buy things to support their family. It's really critical that we have a healthy business climate. And so there are many things that the state is working on, whether it's reducing regulations to make it easier for businesses to prosper, or doing a better job of creating a workforce pipeline. Because we hear from our employers that sometimes they have a really hard time finding the workforce that is properly trained to do the work that needs to be done. So there are lots of things that we could do better in this area, and it is a focus of mine and of many of my colleagues, because we recognize how important small businesses are.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any legislation that's happening right now that you think should be on the radar of small businesses that comes to mind?
Yeah, one of the bills that I think is really important that I want to highlight is it's a bill that is, I'm a co-author on it with a Republican, so it's a bipartisan bill. And there are many co-authors who are Democrats and Republicans. So you see some bills end up being very partisan, but there are bills like this that are bipartisan. And it has to do with small businesses who are facing the threat of a lawsuit over an ADA violation.
This is a huge issue.
Yes. Yeah. Americans with Disability Act, that's what ADA stands for. And businesses want to be complying with the law almost across the board. And so there are an occasional bad actor, but for the most part, they don't even know that the placement of the sign is too low, or that the ramp is going up at a pitch that is not high enough, or that they don't have some particular small thing that basically leads them into a lawsuit. So the bill would allow businesses to cure. It would allow them to receive notice that there is an allegation of a violation, and then give them a period where they could cure that violation without facing a lawsuit. This is a bill that's been run. This is the second year that it was introduced. And I just recently was at a press conference about it. I don't know if it is going to be successful this year, but it's really important for small businesses because we need to continue to set up the systems for success. And we want the violations cured. We're not trying to have a more litigious society. And this is really a problem for many small businesses who've communicated with my office and me directly about the fact that they are facing this is almost an extortion over these types of violations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an issue. And I'm really glad that there's this bill. Bummer to hear that it might not move forward this year, but definitely the Chamber will continue to be engaged and to follow that one. Yeah. You mentioned a workforce. And so, the Vista Chamber, we're deeply involved particularly in youth workforce development through our Velocity internship program and through our Rising Star Scholarship program. And so I'm wondering, you mentioned workforce. How do you think the state can better support workforce development initiatives, but particularly at the local level?
Yeah, there are various programs, and we need to make sure that they're properly staffed and funded. One of them is the California Jobs First, which was formerly CERF. It was initiated in 2021, and it was renamed in 2023. And it focuses on creating high-quality jobs and sustainable economic growth across California in 13 different regions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we also have the High Road Training Partnership, HRTP, and what that does is it provides grant funding for industry partnerships that prioritize high-quality jobs and equitable economic outcomes. So some of this goes into the healthcare sector, but there are also a number of different sectors that are relevant. And part of it is we need a better alignment of when people come out of either community college or the Cal State system or the university system. are they being properly connected to the job opportunities that exist in those regions?
Right.
Because a lot of people, they want to live in the places, or they can only afford to live in the places where they are. So the idea that they would need to go to school for this training a really far distance away, whether it's nursing or any type of thing, really is problematic. So we need to make sure that there's a better alignment there. And there's an enormous amount of discussion always about the Cal States and the UCs because they are funded through the state of California,
right,
as our two public university systems. The UCs are the flagship university system in the world, and we have the top two, UC Berkeley, UCLA. If somebody who graduates from these top schools, that's generation-changing opportunity level for them. So making sure there are enough spots, and we're continuing to increase the enrollment so that more people can graduate from these programs and more people can access these good jobs. That's really critically important.
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned kind of that post-college connection. And one thing that I think Cal State San Marcos is doing really well is a program in their College of Business you may not even know about. I actually serve as an executive in residence. And so I meet with 20 students a semester who are taking a specific class, and I help them make connections to the business community for informational interviews and leverage my connections to help them make connections. And the goal is that they graduate with a job in hand, especially at Cal State San Marcos, where 80% of the students stay here in North County. So I would love to see programs like that expanded across other educational institutions where it's really hands-on, making those connections for students and really a warm introduction into those opportunities.
Yes, and I'll just say that my experience in journalism was the same, where Northwestern University had partnerships with all these newspapers across the country, and we all went to a newspaper and basically did an internship for a quarter or a semester. And what the result of that is that we came out with actual clips. I had actual newspaper stories that were published under my byline, and I could submit them, and that resulted in me being able to be hired at the Los Angeles Times for my first job, which it was
incredible.
It was an expanding economy at that time and an expanding media market, which is not the case now. It's really contracting. But the reality is I didn't know that would be so important until I went through it myself.
Yeah, that's great. So talking about college and careers, the next thing you think about is you graduate from school, you get a job, hopefully you buy a house. So housing affordability is a big issue in San Diego, specifically in North County. And so I'm just curious about what policies you support regarding housing affordability and to help communities meet their housing goals without compromising character and just to provide the housing inventory that we need.
Right. Yeah. In local government in the city of Encinitas, housing was the biggest and most controversial and most difficult issue. And the reason for that at base is that many people choose their communities on purpose because they like the feel of the community. Mm-hmm. And so what we see is that we have a population that's growing, and then we're not adding housing because it's expensive and difficult, and many cities don't want to add housing. So, and you end up with this collision of which results in high housing costs for people, rent going up and mortgages going up, and many people just being completely unable to afford housing really at all. They're paying more than 50% of their income to their housing costs, and that's just it's not sustainable. And it's also, people need to be able to save and to do other things, right? You need to be able to buy groceries and gas and medicines and all the things.
And it would be nice if you had money to take a vacation or do something, right? Not just those needs, but also quality of life things. Exactly.
So there's been an effort for at least, I would say, 10 years, a decade, to add more housing supply. One of the more successful programs has been accessory dwelling units, ADUs. That actually has added substantial number of housing units. And the reason for that is that they're sprinkled into the existing suburbs. Mm-hmm. So they're not big apartment complexes on the corner of a neighborhood are very controversial, but it's basically gentle density that's nearly invisible for most communities. There are some communities that end up impacted, but many can add accessory dwelling units, granny flats, without much of an impact. But it's important that we continue to make it, that we focus on affordability and housing supply and having opportunities for people to live, of course, inside instead of outside homeless,
right,
which is another big problem in the state of California, which I spend a lot of time working on. But I will say that sometimes progress appears to be slow on the supply side, because if you look at the numbers, we're not markedly increasing the amount of housing we're building statewide.
Yeah. You mentioned homelessness, and you've been a leader on this topic. So tell me a little bit about the 2 bills that you ran this year, and how can businesses get involved in this issue of homelessness? Because I really think businesses have to be part of the conversation.
I completely agree with that. I think businesses are the ones who are suffering from the effects of homelessness after the person who's experiencing it. That
Right.
person is suffering the most. But businesses, especially when there are people who are sleeping in doorways of businesses, and homeless people don't have places to go to the bathroom, and they need mental health and drug addiction treatment. And, the people who are the most upsetting for all of us are the ones who are so clearly very sick. And it's not compassionate for us to have the streets be the waiting room, to say we're not building enough housing, as we just talked about. And so what will happen with these people? We really should be providing indoor options for people. And that's why I've been such a big supporter of interim housing, because really, ultimately, what someone needs is 4 walls, a pillow, a bathroom, a little bit of privacy in order to get their life back together. Not big congregate shelters, but in order to assess, what is it that's happening for you? Do you need more intensive treatment? To have the social services come to people, but to have them be inside versus in the riverbed or in the downtown streets or the canyons and creating potential fire hazards. Having unmanaged shanty towns is just the worst solution outcome. And I find it unacceptable that we are allowing this to happen in the state of California. And trying to peel back, why is this happening? Why are we not moving people inside? Who is responsible for this? And this really complicated interplay with counties, cities, the state, the continuums of care, the nonprofits, all of the philanthropists, all of those who are working to help. I think one of our main problems is that we've decided that shelter is inadequate because we always think of congregate shelter. And if we were willing to accept that an interim housing solution, so a tiny home, a trailer park, a mobile home park, that is not meant to be someone's forever home, but at least moves them out of an encampment, that was an acceptable use of money, and our grant funding could go to that. And we would prioritize cities and counties providing the mental health services they need. I think we could make big progress. So that's been one of my efforts, is to really hone in on this. And the reality too is that counties, there's a lot of a focus and spotlight on counties because that is the level of government that provides the mental health and drug addiction treatment.
Okay.
Because of what's called realignment, it's not the state that does that. It is the counties. They get a lot of money for this. And so prioritizing that person who is standing under the freeway underpass without pants on, that person needs to be the top priority. And sometimes what we see is that there are programs, however worthy, that are helping people, with art projects or with wellness centers at schools or with hotlines or with handing out Costco snacks and a flyer. To me, those are not the priority. And we need to become crystal clear on the fact that poor soul under the freeway is the priority and he should be helped first. But it's tremendously difficult to do that. So I'm working on it. I'm doing an Ending Unsheltered Street Homelessness Summit actually next week, which you're all invited to. And so anyway, we need to continue to push.
Yeah, it's just so challenging, and it seems to just be getting worse. As far as for the layperson in the community, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, the likelihood of seeing someone living or someone walking down the street having obviously an issue was just less likely, and it just seems to be growing. And you mentioned, so in your opinion, then it sounds like that mental health and drug addiction is really the key problem versus the few, there are folks who are homeless because they're just a paycheck away from being homeless and then they lose their job, right? There's that category, but then there's also folks who have real deep issues. So is that, you're saying that those are the folks that really where we need to focus our efforts, you think?
I think, so poverty and our whole economic system and the structure that with a minimum wage job, there are almost no actual housing that can be afforded.
Right.
That is a major problem.
Right.
But I do think that the most acute problem, the most devastating problem, are the mental health and substance use problems we see on the street, because those are the people who are literally dying in front of us. And so other people, there are all sorts of things we can always be working on with homelessness. And I think everything's important. I think prevention's important. Right. I think all the subgroups of formerly incarcerated and veterans and LGBTQ and the older population and single parents with kids, all the subgroups are really important too. But if you think about who it is that you as an individual person think is a big problem and feel your heart rips out a little bit when you walk over or by somebody. And we have this in Sacramento where people are camping in the shadow of the Capitol itself. Yeah, and some people have dogs and they have stoves with fires and there's all this smoke and tons of trash, and you just think, what are we doing? Yeah. Why are we not dealing with this? Right. And the other thing that's just a fact is that people die on the street, actually die. 50,000 people have died on the streets, which is absolutely a terrible number. But also people become mentally ill and drug addicted from living on the streets. Yeah. So it is a standalone public health crisis, let alone, connecting it to all the housing issues. And I think that's what happens is we get totally overwhelmed in policy conversations thinking we have to solve the housing crisis in order to solve the homelessness crisis because housing solves homelessness, which is true. But we could laser focus on the mentally ill and drug addicted and the people who are living on the streets unsheltered. Unsheltered street homelessness. We have 180,000 people in California in that category, and we should be prioritizing those people because we can do it. That's the thing. We can do it. We just have to decide we're going to.
That's so interesting. I had Mayor Franklin on this show last year, and he talked also about this issue, and he talked about really supporting conservatorships. How do you feel about that?
I completely support that. Yeah. I think that when people are unable to give consent because of such severe mental illness and substance abuse, that we need to help them. Yeah. We can't just say it's okay to choose to not get help and to suffer as you are. And you see people, in some places you see open drug use. Yeah. I don't think you really see this in Vista, but you see people bent over at those odd angles from fentanyl use.
We haven't seen that here, but I have seen it in larger cities, and it's scary. It's really scary.
It's very scary. Yes. Yeah. And those people are not well. They need to be inside. They need to be in drug treatment. We shouldn't, I don't think it should be acceptable for that to become a public street, to become where that happens. And it goes to businesses being able to be successful. It goes to all the costs of ER visits, jail visits, public safety, all the trash, the enormous amount of trash that's created. It's just at every level, it's so much more expensive, and it's really, we're not serving them. So, but unfortunately, the pendulum is really swung because of this. There's this the main reason that we say we allow this is because of people's human rights, that we don't want to go back to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest where we're locking up all these people. But times have changed. It's 40 years has passed since President Reagan and others in Congress defunded all the mental health institutions, saying that they were going to be community run, and then nothing happened, and people are just living on the streets, and we don't feel like we have the tools. The legislature has created some additional tools like care court, people who are schizophrenic, but the counties need to really embrace this. It's the behavioral health industry as a whole, and then also the counties and the leadership. It has to come from the top, because if we're just doing things the same way we've been doing them, we will continue to have a growing homeless population. The stats show that in California, it's actually nearly flat, unlike other parts of the country that are growing at 18%. So, but we're just in front of this curve in that we got the problems first, but it's still a severe problem. We should be aiming for functional zero on street homelessness. To me, that should be the top priority. Functional zero for street homelessness, and we should have a 5-year plan to get there. And we know the numbers, we can find the people, and we systematically move them in.
Yeah. Wow. That's so much.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's interesting because sometimes people will write back to my newsletter and say, 5 years, why don't you guys get your act together? You should be doing. And I receive that kind of feedback and think, you have no clue what is practical. I mean, if this is even going down in 10 years, I will feel like we're finally making progress, because it's so hard to change the endemic culture that we have that allows for this and feels like, well, people, aren't ready they're not ready for housing, or they're not, there are so many people who feel that way. But we need the public pressure from the public and the business community who says we cannot have this.
Right.
I feel like it has to come from that pressure saying this is not what we want for our state. I do not agree. This has to be the top priority of our politicians. We cannot have street homelessness. We cannot have encampments. This is bad for the environment. It's bad for the people. It's bad for public spaces. It's bad for businesses. Like, let's deal with it.
It's so dehumanizing.
It is.
I think that there's it. Unfortunately, I've seen in our society, I feel like we're shifting to this kind of almost this callous around it, where it's look away or just ignore or pretend as for regular people, regular citizens. And that is really sad. It's really sad that we would ever get to a place where other humans are thought of as not
expendable.
Humans. Right.
Really. Right. Yeah. It's like, well, they're drug addicts, or it's okay if they die, or yeah, it really is very dehumanizing. But for many people, it's very upsetting.
Yes,
and
it is.
It continues to be very upsetting to me personally, but I think it is to most people. And I mean, even, my daughter, when I was being sworn into office, in Sacramento, there's this poor woman who was like, obviously hadn't showered, and she was begging, and she looked awful, so sick. And my daughter turned to me and she said, "Mommy, can you do something about this?" And it even now upsets me, because I think, like, how come I can't do something about helping that woman?
Yeah.
It's like there's so many systems in place that it's like we have our hands tied behind our back, and it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We spend an enormous amount of money. We have so much folk talk about it. Like, we should act.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of acting,
yes,
I'm curious, you've built a career around public service, and you've really been just giving to the public. And I'm wondering if you have advice for anyone else, particularly women who are looking to lead, who are looking to step in and say, I'm here and I want to help. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, the advice I have is that, first of all, it's really important, and it's also very satisfying to be able to work on things that are important to the greater society and bigger than yourself. And so leaning into the instinct to help, which almost all humans have. We want to help other humans. You want to help make our society better. And and this is what I say to youth groups, is you have to raise your hand for the leadership positions. So what you find is that there'll be organizations where nobody wants to raise their hand to be the president, but people will raise their hand to take the ticket at the door for the one event. It's like they'll do the smaller things, but they don't want to do the bigger thing. And what I say is lean into that. Say, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll devote myself to try to make this organization or this system better, because there are a lot of opportunities to participate. We have a very active, it's a democracy with a little d, from the bottom. We have a lot of ways that people participate. And it could be homeowners associations, but it's also water boards and school boards and all sort that are lower level and less scrutiny than like a city council or a Congress or something.
Like a commission at your city?
Like a commission, exactly. And I also share that, I applied for a commission. I applied for the Environment Commission, and I wasn't chosen. And so then 6 months later, I applied, or a year later, I applied for the Traffic and Public Safety Commission, and I was chosen. So sometimes, you only hear the successes of people, but it's important to recognize that I put in my application, did research, spoke to the council, and they didn't choose me. And so I tried again. And then I got on the commission, and it was very interesting. It was the way that I was able to see what my city did, and I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to improve things, but I didn't feel I had visibility into the city. That's one of the reasons that I spearheaded the creation of a civics program at the city, so that residents could just understand all the different departments, go around and do a tour. And so that happens now every year in the city of Encinitas, where it's kind of like a civic academy.
We have one in Vista too.
Yeah.
They call it Vista Leadership Academy, but it's all about the city and how it functions. And that's great. I think that's so important. Civics is really, really important. We have a new program we're rolling out in the spring. I'll just tease that. It's about civics, and we're excited about it, and it's for youth. And so we'll have a big announcement about that coming up for the chamber. So that's cool. So, you're talking when your advice is really about leadership. And so I'm curious if you have a leadership lesson that you've learned that you'd be willing to share with it. With us.
I think that's saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I think it is really true. You are either sitting there trying to help make things better, or other people are making decisions that affect you. And it's the same reason I think women need to be in leadership positions. It's like, I go through this world and interact with the world as a woman, and the world interacts with me as one, and it's different than a man. And I also experience my own body and am involved in my own health, and it's different. So women need to be making decisions about our healthcare or our governance structure or our economic structures. These things. It's just really important that we have participation and that we don't lose that. And there's an environment right now which is really, some have turned against the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. But the reality is that having diversity does matter. We want our power structure, those who are making decisions, to roughly look like our society. I don't think we want to go back to something where it's all white older men who are property owners, right? Like that if those were the only people in power, I don't think we would feel that we had adequate representation. So continuing to have people of color and women and basically all of what our society looks like be in leadership is really important.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And, over the last 6 years since I've been with the chamber, we've really made a strategic initiative to have our board represent the diversity of the businesses in our community. And we're doing, and that wasn't, no one ever said we need diversity, equity, inclusion. We just said our board needs to reflect the folks that are in our community.
Exactly.
And since then, since we've really worked towards that goal, we have seen better programs, better engagement from our businesses, better collaboration with elected officials. It's only improved everything. And if you're not in the room where it happens, you can't be represented. And like you said, on the menu. So I think that's really great. I also think it's really important if you are a leader and you are in the room, to invite others to the table, and to look around to say, oh, who's not here that should be here, and to speak up and to say those things. So I think that's really important too.
Absolutely. And when I was in local government, I spent a lot of time recruiting people for commissions and to be on the city council, to run for the city council. And I definitely am conscious about, on my own staff now, I have 3 offices, one in Sacramento, one in Orange County, one in San Diego County, making sure that there's a conscious thought put behind that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. When you think about North County, I know your district represents more than just North County, but when you think about North County specifically, what do you think is the most exciting? What excites you about our future?
Well, I want to say a really positive word about Vista. I do. Vista is one of my favorite cities in the district.
Mine too.
And I represent almost 1 million people. 1/3 are in Orange County and 2/3 are in San Diego County. And I think Vista is just really well run and very active too. It's on some of these problems like homelessness. The city apparatus, the people who work there, and then also the elected officials are engaged. They're accessible. They're wrestling with the difficulties, which is always a balance. There are always values on both sides of a decision. And so I overall really enjoy Vista, and I try to support Vista. So I was able to get $5 million in the state budget for the Buena Creek Navigation Center, which is a partnership with the City of Vista and the City of Encinitas. And it does provide an opportunity for someone who's living unsheltered on the street to come inside and have casework. And it's I really like that facility too. It's very modest. There's a shared kitchen and then individual private rooms. And then, another wing that has the same thing. So 3 or 4 rooms and 1 kitchen and a bathroom. So it seems like the kind of place where someone could really get their feet back under them. I really feel excited about Vista and the things that are happening here in the city and the people who are in charge.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we're almost done with our conversation, but before we wrap up, I have a couple of rapid fire questions that I ask every guest.
Okay.
So I'd love to know if you have a book recommendation.
Yes.
A book you'd love.
Well, I do a book club for my District 38. It's called Our California.
Okay.
And you can sign up for it on my website, and we basically read 3 to 5 books a year.
Love it.
And we do it over Zoom. And so I take suggestions from people, and then we read books that basically touch the California story in some way, either history or current events. We're right now reading the book Abundance by Ezra Klein.
Okay.
And we just finished reading The High Sierra, A Love Story by Kim Stanley Robinson, which is, he's a science fiction writer, but he applies his love of the Sierras and that mountain range and its history and the stories of people who've been involved in it. And he's so deeply involved in the love of this mountain range that he can describe it in ways, it's like the world building that you would do in science fiction. He's applied to the mountains, and it's so cool. That book is
Sounds
so
really
cool.
rich.
Yeah,
Just
it is, and it's
an experience.
And I like to backpack and hike, but even for people who don't, it's still. I just thought that was a really good book.
Great, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. Senator Blakespear, what's your favorite song? What's your jam?
Well, I'll say my jam right now. I was listening in the car driving here. I'm going to see a concert on Sunday with our 16-year-old son, and it's Ghost.
Okay.
So Ghost is kind of pop metal.
Okay.
It's a little more metal than pop, but there's a pop element, which is how I'm able to access it. So my view on music is that it is all about familiarity. If you know the song, then you like it.
Right.
So I am dedicated to listening to the 21 songs, an hour and a half of the Ghost music. There are only 4 songs that are from the latest album, which is called Skeletor. That's the name of the tour.
Okay.
So I'm really into Ghost right now.
Okay. Those are great reasons. That's so fun. My family, we are big concert goers. We go to a lot of shows, and we have a couple of concerts with our kids coming up too. So that's fun. And it does influence the music that my husband and I listen to, because if we're going to go see an artist,
right,
we want to have familiarity so we can sing along or,
right,
have a good time. It's more fun if you know the music. So
exactly.
Good for you.
Yes.
Metal pop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have to tell you, I did not expect that answer from you today.
Well, I know I'm probably naturally more of the Taylor Swift type of fan, but I'm currently really dedicating myself to this, and I am really enjoying it.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. I didn't expect a metalhead here today, but all right. That's awesome. Okay. What's something that inspires you?
Well, I'm inspired by my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's so great about her?
I think she has a lot of clarity right now about we're in a really difficult situation with our immigrant community in California and the targeting from the federal administration. And she just has a lot of clarity around the fact that we have to close ranks around people. A third of the state is foreign born. There's so many mixed status families, and so many people are really facing this difficult fear and uncertainty, and then of course the trauma that comes from having an interaction with ICE in any way. And there are lots of things that I'm concerned about, I'm basically a hopeful person, and I believe in the power of us as a collective to the arc of history bending toward justice, to quote Martin Luther King Jr. But I do think that we're going to see brighter times ahead, and so I am inspired by my mom and her various thoughts and insights on things.
Yeah. So you're hopeful and optimistic, and you got it from your mama.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so now I want to know a Vista business that you think deserves a shout out.
Yes, well, I think Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps.
We love Dr. Bronner's.
They have this great commitment to sustainability and also to reduce plastic waste, which I'm particularly focused on. The plastics industry is the fossil fuel industry. Everything, the single-use plastic you see when you walk into the market, it's literally everything is covered in it. And that it has a plastic bag has a lifespan of 7 minutes, and it then takes hundreds of years to degrade. And it's like, we have to transition our products away from so much petroleum-based single-use plastic. And we can do that. And you see examples like Dr. Bronner's that have really embraced that as part of their business model.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that.
They're so great. I don't know if you know that we are certifying businesses as green businesses, and they were the first in Vista. Of course they were the first to be certified as a green business. So that was really exciting. But Dr. Bronner's is great, not just for their environmental, the way they treat their employees, the way they pour into the community. They support so many nonprofits.
Yeah.
I approve of that choice. So good job.
Yeah.
Gold star. Well, Senator Blakespear, thank you for joining me today. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you really just want everybody to know, or is there anything that we missed?
No, I really appreciate your interest and your support for local businesses and this podcast. So thank you for including me.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to thank Senator Catherine Blakespear for joining me today, and thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and tell a friend. Help us move Vista forward with velocity. The Vista Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit organization that serves as a catalyst for business growth. Find us online at vistachamber.org.